So I just finished Dan Simmons's The Fall of Hyperion. This is the sequel to Hyperion, his sort of first really big book. I think it won the Hugo Award. It was sort of the Canterbury Tales in space. It was really cool in that it had a whole bunch of pilgrims going to this alien world, and each of them told their stories during this pilgrimage. And so we've got sort of all kinds of different types, different sort of genres and tropes and viewpoints of different stories on different worlds. And it really showed us a unique world. It was a really neat way to sort of flesh out a sci-fi universe. But it does end on sort of a cliffhanger. The pilgrims get to the point of their pilgrimage, but the plot doesn't really happen. So this book is the plot. This book is a sequel that sort of wraps up everything that had been set up in the first book. Now, there are two other books that sort of go on, and the seeds are planted at the end of this for more story, but the main event, the main plot is wrapped up, I would say, by the end of this book. So I didn't really enjoy this one as much as the first one. I found the writing was even kind of bad in some parts. It didn't really hook me. A lot of it, well, I wasn't hooked as much as the first book. It sort of dragged on a bit. Even in the middle section, you have no idea what's happening. The characters don't know what's happening, but the reader doesn't as well. And there's no exposition until the very final end of the book. And even then, you're left trying to fit these pieces together and figure out what happened over the last 500 pages. And it's not complex or convoluted. It sort of makes sense, but in a weird sort of mystical, very sci-fi, almost fantasy way. And I just didn't really enjoy it as much as the first one. I think what the first one had going for it so much was the different perspectives and the different viewpoints. Like I said, that sort of that format, that structure of different stories all being told that all connect to this one being the Shrike that these pilgrims are going to visit. So the first part, we have our POV. So this is our sort of narrator character that everything is seen through his perspective. And we get some weird tenses, as in the present tense when he's relating the story of the pilgrims, but then the past tense when he's relating what happened to him. But then that switches at some point, and the pilgrims, their story becomes the past tense, and his events are in the present tense because he had dreamed. It could have something to do with time, because time travel and the strangeness of time is a theme of this book. But I found it just felt very out of place. And even at some points, I think the author made mistakes in that we're jumping backward and forward into present tense and past tense in the same paragraphs. Anyways, we're following this POV of John Keats, of course. This whole series is a love letter to John Keats, is putting it mildly. At the end of the last book, we had this person, John Keats, who had been an AI created from, reconstructed from everything we know about John Keats and his writing and whatnot. And there was a whole character arc where this John Keats has a human body because he's had this vat-grown body that he's been put in. He's called a cybrid, a hybrid cyborg. And he does something by going into the metasphere, the data sphere, the megasphere, into the sort of the matrix, the code, and does something to delete his original programming so that if he dies in his physical body, he dies for real. And then he goes to Hyperion. Well, he gets killed, and then his sort of consciousness gets put inside of a chip in Braun Lamia's neck. But we have some retconning in this one where there is a new John Keats persona that has been created, and a new cybrid who is back in the center of the web, of the hegemony. And he's the one that's the POV character. We get him relating events around the CEO Gladstone and the web and their war with the Ousters. So the Ousters, this sort of faction that's the great other, this space-dwelling race of humanity that has separated long since from the planet-dwelling hegemony, they are coming to attack Hyperion. And Gladstone reveals that she sort of knows this is coming, but goes along with it. And again, we don't get the whole picture until the very end, and the clues that we do get lead you to conclusions that are not really clear, not really explained by the end of it. But the CEO had been led to believe that the real enemy is not the Ousters, not these outside forces of humanity, but the technocore, the AI that had seceded from the hegemony, but was still operating as sort of a symbiotic, ostensibly benevolent role, helping out humanity. They've created the Farcasters, this system of almost teleportation wormholes where people can travel anywhere just by stepping through a portal, and so on. So she's hinted that she sort of knows, has knowledge, and that her war with the Ousters is just a front. And it actually gets to a point where she sort of reveals an internal dialogue, or reveals to John Keats, who's going by Joseph Severin, the artist who in real life had been at the deathbed of John Keats. the real John Keats in the 1812 or whatever it was, 1816. Gladstone reveals that she's going to destroy the web and destroy the hegemony, this 100 billion people civilization. She's going to tear it down in order to preserve humanity, preserve the species from going extinct. Because as we learned in the last book, there's these whole bunch of factions within the AI, and one of them wants to wipe humanity out. It says, we don't need humanity anymore. They're a potential threat. Let's get rid of them. So while this is all happening, Keats is also dreaming. And when he dreams, he is somehow connected to these Shrike Pilgrims. Now, first he thinks it's because of his twin, the other John Keats program that is running inside Bron Lamia's microchip neck thing. But as the story goes on, he becomes almost a godlike figure where he can connect to and sort of see the thoughts and feelings of everyone. But at the start of the book, it's just the various Shrike Pilgrims. So the Pilgrims have arrived at the place where the Shrike is, and sort of chaos happens. They keep getting split up. Some of them die. For example, Leonard Hoyt, the priest, gets killed by the Shrike. Then, of course, because he has these two cruciforms on him, the Paul Dure cruciform regenerates the body back into Paul Dure. So now Leonard Hoyt's dead. We have now Paul Dure back as a character. Cassad, the colonel, goes off to fight Moneta. He sees this woman that from his past that he's been trying to find and is somehow connected to the Shrike. They have this big battle. He gets pulled away. Saul is with his daughter Rachel, who is aging backwards in time, right? And she's just a few days old. And he's been asked to sort of sacrifice her, just like Abraham offered Isaac, sacrifice her to the Shrike. And he's, for moral, ethical, religious, academic reasons, he's all against this. We've got Bron Lamia with the John Keats program in her neck and this microchip. We've got Martin Salinas, this poet who thinks that his writing, his cantos that he's creating, this poetry is what brought his muse, the Shrike, into being. And we have the consul, who never gets a proper name throughout this whole series, by the way, who was the grandson of this woman, these two people who had a rebellion against the web because the web was destroying their planet ecologically, and has betrayed both the Ousters. He was working as a double agent for the Ousters, but he's betrayed them both by using this device to open the time tombs, which are these structures that are moving backwards in time, and releasing the Shrike upon Hyperion, the planet. In part 2, we have Martin Salinas being captured by the Shrike and placed on this thorn tree. A tree, massive tree of thorns where all these people are impaled, perpetually living, perpetually in some sort of hellish agony. We have Hetmastine, this Templar, this sort of religious sect that worships nature and trees. He is somehow returned. We never heard his story in the first book because he disappeared. He's back, and he sort of reveals some sort of a connection between the Shrike Church, the cult of the Shrike, and the Templars, and how the Templars are going to work with the Shrike to attack humanity or something, or wipe out humanity. And the Hetmastine, who his ship had been this world tree, this massive tree that's a ship. He's been brought to Hyperion because he's going to use the thorn tree, the Shrike's thorn tree, as his ship. But then he dies, so his whole thing doesn't really matter. It just sort of tells us there's some connection between the Templars and the Shrike cult. Bron Lamia, or is it Lamia Bron? I think it's Lamia Bron. Lamia Bron gets captured by the Shrike and plugged in, like with a big thing into the back of her neck, and enters the data sphere with the Keats persona, the original one, and meets with this AI who explains to them. We do get some exposition at this point where there are these gods. There's this actual guy, an actual Jesuit guy, Teilhard or something, who's like a real historical person who, I didn't read into this too much, but he had some sort of a heretical idea about evolution and how God is going to be created in the future by the natural evolution of humanity. Anyways, that's what actually happens. So the AIs are trying to create their ultimate intelligence. Just like humanity has created AIs, this sort of successor intelligence to them, AIs are doing the same, trying to create this ultimate intelligence, this UI that will supplant them. And it's parallels with the real-life John Keats poetry, Hyperion, in the Fall of Hyperion, where it's talking about the battle between the Olympian gods and the Titans. So the Titans were the original ones, but then their progeny, the Olympian gods, overthrows them and replaces them. So that's, in this world, the AI is replacing the humanity, but then the UI is replacing the AI. And it made me really think about how funny in 2026 the thought of AI as being sort of the boogeyman and this great evil, and AI is going to take over the world, and AI is seen as a bad thing. We should be very careful about developing it. But come to the 2020s when we figure out how we can monetize AI and how it's the next big thing, and we're just rushing headlong to see who can create the biggest and the best the fastest. Anyway, this AI in the data sphere reveals to John Keats and Lamia Braun that in the future the AI do create their UI, ultimate intelligence, at some point, but that humanity as well creates this UI, their own version of this UI through natural evolution. Just by accident, this god comes into being. And these two gods, these two ultimate intelligences, the machine and the human, are in a sort of internal struggle far in the future. And because of advanced technology and whatnot, their fight is starting to leak back into the present. And the human UI, or the human god, sent back a part of it. Now it's Trinity. One of its parts of its Trinity is this empathy, and it sent empathy back into the past because it was tired of fighting. And yeah, for whatever reason, there's empathy in the past, capital E, empathy. And so the machine UI sends back the Shrike, try and find this empathy and destroy it for this war. And that's why it has this giant pain tree of thorns, is to try and create as much pain as possible to lure this empathy out of hiding. And the way it's setting up the story is that this John Keats persona is going to be the empathy, the UI sent back from the past, as sort of a blend of the human and machine. He's an AI created persona, but he is in a human flesh. And I was really struck by just how Dan Simmons loves John Keats so much that he creates this fictional world where John Keats is like a messiah, a Jesus figure. And I was like, he's really going to go there. But he doesn't. And the John Keats persona rejects this and then gets destroyed, gets straight up killed. Braun gets sent back and wakes up in the time tombs, and John Keats is dead. We still have the other John Keats, who is our POV, back in the sort of the core. We also get Colonel Cassad, his fight with the Shrike. He duels the Shrike one-on-one, and he meets Moneta again, but Moneta this time doesn't recognize him because she has been traveling backwards in time as well with the Shrike. And so as he's traveling forwards in time, she's sort of losing memories of him. And this is sort of the first time they met, and she recognizes him as, oh, you're the warrior that's been prophesied to fight the Shrike. And so he 1v1s the Shrike, seems to be winning somehow because he's got this sort of super armor on him. And this battle eventually pushes them into the far, far future, where Cassad leads an army of thousands against an army of 1,000 Shrikes. And Moneta reveals that this sort of battle is taking place on millions of worlds. This battle of mankind versus the Shrikes. And they're doing it not to prevent the Shrike from coming back. They know that at least one of the Shrikes is going to go back in time through the time tombs, but if they can win this war, it will only be one and not this horde of them. And so, yeah, he is the prophesied warrior who fights this future battle and defeats the Shrike. He then gets killed, and his body goes back in time and is interred in one of the time tombs, where it is found by the remaining pilgrims. Braun decides to go out and try and find Salinas. She realizes he's on the pain tree and wants to go get him off. She goes into the Shrike's palace, but then finds him on the floor. He's not actually on this tree, but he's plugged in to this weird thing, which she then karate chops to cut the thing off of his skull and free him. And the Shrike's gonna attack her, but then she can somehow walk on air and then turns the Shrike into glass and he explodes. None of that makes any sense, except for the fact that she is pregnant with John Keats's baby from the first book, which makes her sort of a Mary figure. And the John Keats persona, again, refers to himself as sort of a John the Baptist. He's not going to be the Jesus figure. He's the one that paves the way and gets things ready. And yeah, it gets to be too much like halfway through the book. One of the big climaxes is the point when Sol has his baby Rachel, who's on a ticking time clock. It's almost her birthday. She's going to be unborn or something. And the Shrike appears and he's like, I'm not going to offer my baby to you. Humanity is not dealing with gods based on obedience anymore. We've moved beyond that. But then he hears a voice, and it's Rachel herself asking him to offer her up. And so because it's his child asking and not the god asking, he then gives the child to the Shrike, which then finally opens the time tombs and creates this chaos. Meanwhile, on the web in the hegemony, it turns out that the ouster attack on Hyperion is not the only one. There's ouster swarms that have been sneaking towards all of the worlds of the hegemony very slowly at sublight speed for centuries, and they just have shown up. They've planned this for centuries and just start wiping out worlds, just utterly destroying, nuking worlds from orbit. And the core is like, what can we do? Hey, we have this weapon, it's called the Death Wand. It just kills absolutely everyone if you use it within a 3 light-year radius, which is huge, by the way. And they're like, hey, get all of the hegemony citizenry, get them into the labyrinths, because all these different worlds have labyrinths, these And they're like, the 5 kilometers of rock where these labyrinths are protected them from this death ray. And they're like, okay, sure, we'll go along with it because they really have nothing. And then John Keats, the persona, who goes to one of the AI again, one of the AI who's sort of on humanity's side. And we get more exposition, and it turns out that the AI, there is no sort of world where the AI has their hardware. They're in between the worlds in the web. So the Farcasters, which is this web network of portals transporting everywhere, that's where the AI exists. And we find out that the ouster attacks, the supposed ouster attacks on all of these different web worlds are actually not the ousters. It's the AI has been planning it. And this is their way to wipe out humanity. And their plan is to put everyone in the labyrinth worlds. And that's where the cruciforms are. The cruciforms are these beings, these organisms created by the AI. And cruciforms will allow humanity to sort of live forever, but at a much lower intellectual state. Right. And this suits the AI just fine because the AI are actually using, through neural implants and connections to the internet, basically, are using humanity for their computational power. And they exist within the sort of Farcaster portals, but they use humanity's brains as computational power. So that's their plan. But John Keats figures this out. And of course, because he's a godlike AI, he goes around and tells everyone. And humanity, Gladstone, manages to save the day by destroying all Farcaster portals and destroying the entirety of the web. So now all worlds are cut off from one another. The only way to travel is by ship. And of course, that wreaks havoc on economies. Millions and millions of people die, but they manage to sort of survive and the civilization can continue. And the ousters, who had been attacking Hyperion, once the AI has been destroyed, they agree to work with Gemini and sort of rebuild. And that's how it ends. It's kind of a cool ending, but I don't know. It just felt like there was so much going on. And then we get the weird twist that like John Keats goes into the Sphinx, which is one of the time tombs, where the Shrike had taken Rachel, Sol's baby, and manages to steal the baby back. But because he doesn't have physical form, he can't go back to the sort of the world of the temporal living, back to Sol. So then Moneta manages to take the baby and bring the baby back to Sol, and then Moneta reveals that she's actually Rachel, and that as this baby has been aging backwards in time, Rachel has been aging forwards in time in the future, like way, way, way in the future. And she's been chosen to sort of follow the Shrike backwards in time through the time tombs because. And she gives Sol back her younger self and says like, hey, the baby's aging normally again. You should come through this portal after I get through and come to the like way in the future and live out your life there for some reason, so that the baby can grow into me, who then can come back in time and fall in love with Colonel Kassad and defeat the Shrike or something. It was a lot. Yeah, we never figure out who the empathy is. I guess it's this baby that Lamia Braun has. It still feels weird that he wrote this whole thing to make Keats sort of a godlike figure. I'd love to resurrect John Keats, which is the whole point of this book, and show him this book, but that would be really weird because then he'd be resurrected. Anyways, not bad, but not as good as the first one. I certainly didn't enjoy it. Anyways, that was Dan Simmons, The Fall of Hyperion.